Good morning, everybody. Hope you've had your coffee now.
Yes, we're good.
Kylie Bartell and myself, Alicia Bradburn, are here today for the Horseman's Hot Seat with Doug Mills.
Yes.
Very excited to speak to Doug.
Yeah.
As you probably all know, Doug has been in the industry for many years, very accomplished horseman. So we're very excited to get started with him. But we'd first just like to thank Marg and Ryan from Horse Expo Canada for bringing us all together to another expo where we can share information like this and just have a lot of fun.
Totally.
And also would like to thank our sponsors, Cowboy Channel of Canada,
Yes.
for making this stage possible and this platform so that we could hear more from our clinicians.
Very much so. Just to get us started, Doug, for any folks who might not know as much about what you're here and what you're about, do you mind just briefly introducing yourself for everyone?
Yeah, I'm Doug Mills, obviously that's been said. I'm a horse trainer clinician, more clinician now, more trainer than, people trainer than horse trainer now.
Isn't that how it always comes back to it? Hey, we want to do this thing with the horse, and then it comes back to us.
Exactly, that's what pays the bills, to be close to the horse.
Oh, that's so good. Fantastic. Well, we're going to jump right in. Our first question for you today is, what attributes are must-haves when you are purchasing a horse?
I always start at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's got to have good feet,
Yeah.
good legs going up, and then it just, the higher up the body I get, pretty comes into factor there.
Sure.
They got to have, all the lines in the right places, short back, a lot of slope to their hip, good sloping shoulder, short, pretty little neck that takes you to the gorgeous little head.
Right.
And then put papers on that, and I'm all in.
Off you go.
As long as it fits my pocketbook.
That's fair. That's a component. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And is there a specific breed that you would prefer?
The quarter horse fits what I like to do more. I like
Okay.
to do more cow stuff, performance stuff, rodeo horses, and that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
Have you worked with any other breeds or kind of dabbled or connected, or is it been
Yeah,
mostly quarter horses the whole way through?
I really don't know there's a breed that I haven't worked with when you do this stuff. with the
that's a
clinics.
good point.
You never know what you're going to get. But
For sure,
yeah,
for sure.
It's been a good learning experience for sure, because it's you always hear stories about the thoroughbreds got their thing and the Arabs got their thing, and they're branded with different personalities. But to me, I never did see that as a kid. I grew up on a ranch, so I was fortunate enough to be able to get at it early and play with some horses in the raw, like our brood mares run wild on the mountain just along with a stud, and they weren't even broke to lead.
Wow.
We'd trail them. We'd trail them just like cattle down to the bottom, trail them, load them on a liner, and haul them to the winter range. So, when you wanted to start one, you roped him, right? So that's kind of. So I got to see the raw horse. So I seen. They were all quarter horses, but I seen Arabs, thoroughbreds, warm bloods. I seen every type of horse that the other breeds are branded as, right in that little herd of, I think we had 25, 30 mares.
Right. And when you start to see that many horses, I assume that the principles that underlie and apply to all start to become more and more clear, because it's not about a breed at that point. You're just seeing these different things come up.
It's to me, it's all about their natural survival instincts.
Right.
Right. And then I believe that their experiences from that day forward is going to enhance more what they got. Right. If they're more the flighty horse, and then when the human gets involved and we try to manage that, or even if the human don't get involved, if they've had some predator attacks, or predator near misses, we'll call it, and running has got them out of that, they're going to be really high into the flight side of things.
For sure.
Right? But if they've been in deep snow and, pack of wolves come after them, then they herd up and they'll stand and fight. They won't run because they can't run. So it's fight or flight. They'll do one or the other.
That makes so much sense to me, but I've never heard anyone describe how their experiences and how that might encourage them to be more one or the other. Because you often will see horses that are a little more flighty, they're going to move a little more, or the ones that sull up and are just going to hold a little more, and that can come from their experience. I've never heard that, but.
So that's their survival experience, right,
sure.
from the predator. But then I find the same thing happens with humans, right?
Yes.
The human contact, if their first experience with a human is to try to control them, and they break free that control, they're going to be really flighty because they believe that runner
answer.
got them out of it, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Or if they couldn't, right? If you roped him and snubbed him up right away and he couldn't run, then he'd go to fighting. That's when he'd start kicking and biting and squealing. You know what I mean?
Right,
It's
right.
all extremes, but that's
Sure, and that's where I was going to take
Yeah.
it to next. Is those are the extremes, and
Yeah.
ideally we're finding somewhere in the middle, or not even in the middle, but something different where they're, you're working with them in a way they can understand,
Yeah.
instead of pushing to those edges. Yeah.
Just wanted to jump in there, Doug. When you're mentioning like prey predator, do you include like a bit of a talk on that sort of horse psychology, if you will, in your program, so that people kind of?
Well, to me, I keep it very simple.
Okay.
Like there's the survival instincts that's the predator and prey thing, right?
Yep.
So that's when it's fight or flight or do the opposite.
Okay.
Do the opposite will come in play lots of times, but
And where does that come from? Because you kind of explained where fight and flight would
it's
come
all
from.
survival. It's a God-given great thankful that it's God-given that they can survive the predators over the years. So if the predators are trying to corner them into a box canyon where they can't get away, they instantly go to the left. As soon as the
Okay.
predator's trying to make them go right, they try to go left.
Okay. Do the
Right.
opposite.
Yeah, and if the predator's trying to run them down, then they know that. Like
Mm-hmm.
they'll just kind of run them down and get closer to them. They'll stop and fight. Right.
Okay.
So it's all triggered response. If one's not working, they go to the other, and sometimes they do all three.
For sure.
And I've used different terms on it just to make it easier for people to understand how it relates to them when they're on their horse. And I call it run away, lean, or do the opposite.
Okay.
So they're always trying to run away from what I'm asking, or they lock up and lean and won't go anywhere, or they do the opposite. Right? So a horse that gets spooked and bolts, he's running away. If somebody's pulling on him, he's leaning on pressure, and he's doing the opposite of what he knows we want him to do.
Right.
Right.
So they can do all three, but because it's important to understand those triggers, because they'll always change if you can stay the course. Right? If you're having a conversation about don't run away, that conversation has to stay on until they quit running away.
Yeah.
No, it's not on my time; it's on his time.
Yes.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
good.
interesting. I never heard
I
it
got you
explained
guys
like
thinking,
that.
both you guys
You
are-
do.
I know.
I'm like,
honestly,
oh, I like
think
it.
half the time these talks
got
I
it
go
again,
back
honey.
and
I got him. I got.
it's so good. I know half the time
You
I
can
hear these
imagine
things.
our table talk around our family.
Right. Yeah, I
so
can.
good.
Whole family at it.
Yeah, yeah. Half the time in these talks, I hear things and I'm like, I can't wait to go back and like do something with my horse, or just it starts to cheer.
I
in
almost
the
feel a little
gears,
bit
but-
selfish because it's like this interview is for everybody to benefit, but I feel like I'm really benefiting quite a bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Want to jump to
So
our next?
I'll just touch on one more thing. So
Yes,
that's
please.
the
For sure.
survival instinct, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The pecking order is another huge thing, and
Yeah.
it's number one on my list.
Okay.
Because when you're trying to without establishing the pecking order, I find it's not talked about a lot. I mean, it's out there, but there's not a lot of data on how to establish it, how to
Right.
maintain it,
Right.
and
So is that like leadership? Is
to
with
me
your
it's
horse?
not leadership.
Okay.
Leadership to me is once you've covered all the bases, you've got every body part broke down, so you've taught every body part to move in every direction at various speeds.
Okay.
So they follow a field with every body part in every direction.
Okay.
And they've been taught that. I didn't just make them. They have to, every segment of that has to be taught one
Okay.
at a time, independently, right? In order, because you got to check it to see if they learned it, and you got to check it to see if they're in runaway mode. They're going to be in runaway mode, or they're going to be in lean mode, right? So if they're leaning, I need to tap them through that and get them to move. But the pecking order, back to that part of it, because it can kind of get confusing right here if you don't stay on track. The pecking order is what happens in the herd every single time a new horse comes into the herd.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's kind of chaos in the herd until you get that harmony, get that sorted out. Then there's
Yeah.
harmony in the herd.
Right.
But the second you take one horse out for the weekend and bring him back, it happens again. Right? So a lot of times when I talk about trainers about that, when I was trying to figure it out myself, trainers say, well, I only got to deal with that pecking order in the beginning. But I felt I was dealing with it every day. Like, why is it
Okay.
every day? Then it dawned on me, it's because I'm leaving the herd. Unless I sleep with my horses at night, I have to establish it every day.
Wow, that's
And
interesting.
a lot of times people get the wrong impression. They think they got to go out there and establish that pecking order, right?
Yeah.
And establish the pecking order just means that he has to move from a sensitive, asking pressure
Yeah.
and show me that he accepts that. He shows me that he accepts that by just asking him.
Okay.
But we're kind of programmed to use pressure and release. So we ask pressure for a horse to move, and if he don't move, we just add more pressure. And if he don't move, we add more pressure. Then he moves, then we release and pet the hell out of him. Right? And we've skipped 3 or 4 steps there that he should have been moving way back here, because you'll never establish the pecking order by shoving up here. You got to ask back here, because then you see what they're really thinking.
That's so good. Yeah, and such a it makes me think of a very empathic switch to being able to really see the way they see it. You know, we see it this one way. We kind of get into thinking that we're going to go this progression, pressure, pressure, release. But I'm just even still stuck with that, or thinking on that thought of, from their perspective, they're herd all the time, and even if you were there every day and you go away to sleep, you're leaving. You're out, and you're not a constant.
I'm quite relieved to
presence
hear
there.
that, actually, Doug, because that was the story of me and one particular horse who's quite a dominant horse.
Yep.
But I kind of felt like I had failed every day, because every day I came out and I got tested by this horse. And I was like, I thought we wrapped this up yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and he's just
That's
like
a very interesting
you-
concept you bring up.
I went back to taking care of things for the whole night. Well, you weren't here, so now we got to have this discussion again.
And that
that's
makes
just part of their-
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you make that first, I call it the ABCs. There's only 3 things that I think about when I'm training horses.
Sure.
That is, establish the pecking order first. We do that by having them move sensitive.
Okay.
And in that category, I want to make them, I want to bluff them, because taps is what makes that happen. That's the only way I can make them to move with light pressure, is I got to use the taps of a lunge whip, dressage whip, and transfer that to a lead rope and my spur. And eventually I don't need anything. But if I don't have that,
Doug, so taps as opposed to constant pressure is what
Right.
you're saying? Okay.
right, because
Very
constant
important.
pressure, they lean on pressure. There's
Yes.
a certain amount of pressure you can deliver, and then they lean back into it.
Totally.
Right.
And that's about 10 times past where it would be for a horse to move willingly.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? That's why it's hard to ever get willingness, because we shove them too hard.
Right.
And they're moving, but they're growly about it.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the taps, that's a whole nother, it's a whole nother
Yep.
topic. Like, I could go on that for a week, because I'm just learning more and more every day about how to deliver those taps.
Okay.
Because the hardest horse I've ever had to train is one that will not move his feet. Will not move his feet.
Sticky.
Yes.
So sticky. So when I first started using taps, I think everybody's the same. We just start tapping him, and he don't go, and we tap him again. Pretty soon I'm hitting him as hard as I
Right.
want to hit him.
Right.
And I'm like, this ain't working. What else can I do? It's just,
Right.
I don't want. I take him home. I don't want to sit here and beat on it. And
Right.
that has come from, imprinting horses and stuff. That's a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
other deal too.
Yep.
And it's nobody's fault, but just the environment. Again, that horse's experience that I talked about earlier.
Right.
If that horse learns to push around people from the time he's a young foal, he treats people as though it's another horse. He starts biting at them and nipping at them and kicking at them. But when he's
Yes.
just a foal, it's no threat. So, and then he gets really pushy, because we can drag him around and muscle him around and push him around off his feet. Because now we're skipping the taps altogether, because we're strong enough to muscle him around.
Right.
But that won't last. So that's not a sustainable.
It won't last. So then when those kind of horses taught me more about tap than anything, because I learned how there was a specific way that I could deliver those taps and make him move. Because, I had horses come to my place that I was using all the pressure I had with a lunge whip, 2 hands, and I couldn't get them to take 1 step forward.
Yeah.
And round pin, they were that locked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm too bullheaded to send him home, because I'm trying to learn this, right? I'm trying
Yeah.
to figure out, if I can get through him, there's, hopefully I can save one more down the road somewhere.
Totally.
And I learned how I could kind of get through him, but it really set me down the path of,
Yeah.
it's funny, because imprinting had such good intentions. It was
Totally.
out
Yeah.
there for the right reasons, but like most of horsemanship stuff, the wrong maneuver in the right maneuver in the wrong hands
Yeah.
is
Takes
is
us
lethal.
down a road we don't want to go on.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Dr. Miller is a genius.
A genius. But if again, if cowboys, if you had ranch horses, that's the only ones you ever imprinted them, and ranchers only working with them, yeah, that's you go to totally different product.
Right.
Right.
But the city is when you got people in the city that don't get their horses out, they're not afraid of people to start with.
Right.
The last thing they need is to be imprinted. They need to be sensitized.
Right.
Right.
For sure.
Makes me just really think how important it is to be able to look at the creature in front of you, and just see what tendencies, what natural tendencies are they bringing to the table, and then create a plan based on what they need. Like being able to, instead of coming with these ideas of what you want or things like that, being able to just, some horses need to be more sensitized, some horses need to be just help to calm down a little more, but being able to adjust and be there with that horse in front of you on that day can be really helpful.
That's another very interesting topic, because I'm completely the other side of the hill from that, I find, right?
Yeah.
Because when I think of A, I only go to A until I get to B, and I only go to B till I get to C.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, because if I check A, I check it to everything. So I know what that horse needs daily.
Yes.
Because I don't want him to be super sensitive, and I don't want him to be sticky.
Yep.
So the way I ask him to move balances him out.
Yes.
If he's sensitive, I address it instantly on the first move. So I'm establishing the pecking order.
Sure.
And working on his natural tendencies to balance him out.
Yes.
On A.
Yes.
You know, and that's funny. It just dawned on me when you said that, because that's another big part of it.
Yes.
That's always been a big question in my mind about how do I stop this, again, this Arab or this thoroughbred won't stand still.
Right.
And it's sayings like you can't make him stop right now, but you can make him stop right here. You know, from Tom Dorrance and Ray Hunt and, you know, them guys before me that I always learned from. And don't ever try to make a horse stop his feet, make him want to stop his feet, those kind of things.
Oh, so good.
So it's having that understanding that if he's moving his feet, that's the only thing I'm focused on.
Yes.
If he's not moving his feet freely, that's the only thing I'm focused on.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's been a cool journey, that one.
Yeah, and that idea that their feet are telling you something about where their mind is at, right? Like if you can get the mind, the feet come pretty easy. But if you're kind of, being able to, talk to those pieces, that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Doug, you kind of got me curious about this tapping thing now. Do you think that's something that we can unpack a little here, or is it too big?
No, it's not too big at all. It was big when I started it, because, I mean, I went down the road, like I done it wrong way more than I ever got it right. But when I got it right, it made me, and the struggle I have with it today is when I start trying to tell people how to do it, I lose them. It's deep, because I had to learn it deep, and I don't know any other way to simplify it. But it's basically you have to bluff them into thinking you have more pressure than you have.
Okay.
And the easier you get that done, or the quicker you get that done in his life, the easier it is. If you wait too long, or if he's been imprinted first, or we build a bond with him first, or we build trust with him first, doubles it.
Right.
Doubles
That
it.
makes
so
sense.
now you got to be way better with your taps.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, in the beginning, like a horse that's really afraid, like I said, our horses were brood mares that not even halter broke. So when you get one like that, now I've kind of adapted the Liberty program so I can talk to their mind and get control of them, establish a pecking order first. That's the very first thing I do at Liberty. So with my students, I have them do a lesson called Send Off Food. So there's a bucket of grain right there, because Liberty work is so hard to do. Like that, if you put 100 people in a room, like 5 might be able to do it if you're right there coaching them.
Sure.
And the others, you'd have to grab them by the shoulder. You know, in the beginning, it's just too much going on, and there's too much. We fight too much of our natural tendencies to magnetize to the horse. And you got to have a push, and you got to have a release.
Yep.
And that push and release can't just be speed.
Yep.
It's got to be angle, speed, your hand. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you just can't chase him around. Right, you get him running around there, you've missed the opportunity to establish a pecking order, because he's in protective mode. He's defensive, right? But if he looks at me and I turn on and I lift my hand and I just slowly start threatening to him, and he's looking at me and you see him looking, I just throw that stringer at him very soft, and he takes a move and I stop. And then I can repeat that until he drops his head down. Like if he gets tight and goes, then I just wait right there. I don't move until he goes around and stops. Or a horse that runs around when you first get in there.
Yes.
Everybody wants to, whoa, let's try to stop him, shut him down. You got to let him stop on his own, and then you got to start from 0 to push him.
Right.
And if you push him too past the push, what I mean is if you ask him to go and you don't release the second he goes, release by standing still, he's going to do it all over again.
Right.
So the grain was my genius idea of having them come back in, push them out, and then you get a regroup, and people learn how to practice their push with just their hand without moving your feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Magic. And then you get to use your taps too.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything's, for me, it's timed, because I learned through the taps that if everything is not timed, it don't work. Right.
Right.
Because it's not consistent.
Yeah.
So are you talking about like timing?
Timing. No, timing, counting. 1001,
Oh, okay.
1002, 1003,
Okay.
1004, right? Because we don't pack scales,
Right.
so I pack a clock. I'm
Okay.
counting all the time. So if I want you to move, I'm pushing you from this distance.
Right.
I'm not going to wait till I go up and push you, because in the beginning your horse like, you can't even reach me. Like, no way I'm moving. But
Right.
when I got that stick with me and I give her 4 seconds of this and then start tapping
Yeah.
and build the tap till he goes out and quit,
Right.
that's one.
Yeah.
Second time they come in, now it's a pattern. Prep, and I start moving again. And if he moves within 4 seconds, the release is immediate.
Right.
If it's 4 seconds again, I'm doubling the push. So the
So you're-
release is later.
Yeah.
So you're starting off soft and it's a progression. So you're hoping that in the end, he's just going to move off your slightest.
Not hoping, it happens.
Haha. Yes.
There's no
Okay.
hope in it. It's going to happen.
Yep.
Because it's if the only way it won't happen is if I quit. If I just quit, then I don't do it again.
Right.
Right.
Or if I
You're not believable then.
I'm not believable.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
build the taps and he runs away and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, this ain't working. Now let's go to the house and try again tomorrow.
Then
He's
he's
gonna
like,
run off.
okay, so that worked what I did, right?
It worked because you check it daily. Because
Yeah.
that's the ass. That's the ear pin of a horse trying to establish a pecking order.
Right. So
Right.
it's essentially, if you give up before the job is complete, the horse feels that he is
Now that pressure means nothing, so you got to add more physical pressure.
right.
Yeah.
I call the command physical pressure. Right?
Okay.
At first it's air, right? I'm only
Yep.
pushing on air.
Yep.
But when I touch him, I got to have a feel, because I can't move my horse just off air. I need to have him following a feel. So I got to have the connection. But after I've taught him to move off air, I can dictate to him, because of the timing of the taps,
Yes.
how light I want him.
I love how concrete you make that idea. I'm trying to move air. I know it's a bit, it's not concrete to move air, but that idea that I'm
visual.
going to try to move, a visual, thank you, that
Yeah.
you're trying to move air before you get into anything physical. Because I think sometimes when people come to clinics, they struggle because they see clinicians, horsemen have mastery in their hands, and they're trying to do the same thing, but the person in the clinic maybe doesn't have the same feel behind the horseman's hands. And that's
Absolutely.
it's hard to describe, it's hard to communicate to people. And so that visual you just gave is probably one of the clearest ways that I could say, like, it's
Yeah.
the thing before the thing happens where it's most important. Before the stick comes in, what
Right.
happened right before then that got this result versus that result.
Yeah. And it's kind of even a deeper level than that.
Yeah,
Not that
please
I
share
haven't gone
more.
deep enough, but
Yeah.
when you watch a herd of horses running together wild,
Yes.
you can watch simultaneously, they go to the left or they go to the right simultaneously.
Yeah.
Right? So they're all hooked and plugged into the first horse,
Right.
wherever that energy goes. So it's energy that they're following.
Yeah.
Right? I experienced thing one time in my life. I experienced 2 bands of horses got out. They got together. So I'm out there chasing them around, trying to separate them, get them back in.
Okay.
Not a big deal on a ranch. Happens
fair
all the
enough.
time. But anyway, I'm running them through the trees, through the cedar trees, and there's two different trails. One went this way and one that went this way.
Yeah.
Went around. They both come to the same place, but this one just took a different route to get there.
Okay.
And the herd was all mixed up, and I'm hot on them, right? I'm coming right behind them.
Yeah.
And they split at that exit, and it was 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, and they split like that. Herd A went that way, and herd B went that way, and they completely separated, and it was that quick. Like within a blink of an eye, they had to make a decision,
Yeah.
because there'd be one right behind the other. This one would go there, that one would go there, this one would go there, 2 would
Right.
go there, that one would go there.
Yeah. They're really almost like the master of flow states, just
Yeah.
being able to drop into the zone, and it's not like a technical thinking, it's just that you follow where your leader goes. And
Right.
it's instinctual. And
Yeah.
that's a fascinating story. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that
It
story.
rocked my world for a long time,
Right.
too.
The most perfect sort in the shortest amount of time, but they just do it all themselves instinctually. That's incredible.
Doug, do you find it hard, because we as humans tend to be predatorial, to teach that first part of, when you're saying that it starts with just moving air? Do you find that it's human nature to almost want to skip that step and go right to the
No,
touching.
I find everybody gets it right off the bat.
Do they?
They're pretty light with it all the time.
Okay.
Well, I wonder. I'd be curious. Once you
I'm just joking.
establish.
That's what I say the most. I can't believe you took me serious. Have you
Well, you
taught
look pretty
people?
convincing.
That's too funny.
It's not our instinct to do that.
No.
Yeah. Well,
We're
and I
not very
wonder.
patient.
I teach it for a living, and I
Yeah.
still catch myself trying to muscle and
Go right
manhandle.
to it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel you.
That's why I count. I
Oh,
count
that's
to
good.
keep myself on track.
Okay.
And I tell my students that when I coach them online, I coach
Yeah.
your video,
Yeah.
I count right on live. They can hear me counting, and I'm like, oh, only 2. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
I thought you'd catch that. And I'm like, I'll never let that one go. Like, I'm
Yeah.
counting.
Yeah.
If you don't count, you're not consistent.
Right.
Right.
There's
Can't
got to
be.
be that time for the horse to respond, right?
Well, and
Yeah.
the
And
And
consistent.
it's only the beginning. Like, it's only that first initial
Right.
ignition of whatever lesson you're on. Because I check every lesson, and it's all about body control. Forward, back, left and right, hips and shoulders, neck and nose.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so everything I'm working on gets very clear. And I've taught it so slow that it's very clear.
Right.
So managing it and maintaining it down the road is
Right.
very simple.
You can add speed easily if you've got it down pat.
This is another thing that blew my mind, is like that weaving through the bush story, is every time when I trained ranch horses, when we turn them out in the fall and get them back in the spring on their first year, on their 3-year-old year, it was always like starting over. They would buck, they would bolt, they would spooky, they would stand still to be saddled, and it was like they went right backwards again. Give us the impression they didn't really learn it, they'd forgot it, right?
Sure.
So
Right.
we had to restart them again.
Yep.
So when I kind of leaned into that a little bit and started the teaching part of it, I could see a big change in my horses. They got better. But it was only a few years. It was a few years after that I had my first horse come back after a season, and he was right where I left him.
Really.
Amazing.
Wow.
Right where I left him.
Yeah.
Like I quit riding him yesterday.
Oh.
Like come to like every session, because every lesson from the time I walk out in the pen is a lesson. It's a teachable lesson.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
you teach it, or you just corner him, am I teaching him to be caught or catch me, or am I just cornering him?
Right.
Or am I making sure he leads behind my shoulder when I get there? Because if he's not behind my shoulder, the pecking
Yeah.
orders is out of whack right there.
Right. Yeah. It's a little bit of a shift from like just trying to get the task done to did we create a sustainable process? The process with which we got this done, are you learning the process of how we do this, or just that thing got done and we've forgotten it? And so that makes sense that it would come back, and that's the way the contract works. This
Yeah.
is how what I know what to do.
And that on my list, because like I said, there's 3 things I focus on when I'm teaching horses. And there's 7 with teaching people.
Okay.
And
Well,
that was
tell
the
us.
7th one was the patterns. That's what I just talked about. That taught
Yes.
me that. When you're working in patterns, you're very teachable, but you learn how to ask the right questions. You learn how to ask what he's thinking about today, what he's really thinking about today. And you can't do that with a lead shank. Even if you got a lead shank on him, he can't. He still acts like you don't have a lead shank on him. He's that free.
Interesting. I think that can be really interesting. You just said what he's really thinking about. Do you know what he's really thinking about, rather than your own projection of what
Right.
he's thinking about? So being able to get, how do you differentiate that, or how do you discern what's he really is?
Well,
This
it comes back from what I talked about first, to establish
Yeah.
the pecking order, right?
Right.
Because if my horse his pecking order is in check from lesson 1,
Yeah.
after I've taught him, because I teach him to accept, and I call it acceptance now, because that's what it is. He accepts me as his higher in the pecking order.
Right.
And I told you before, I don't use leadership yet,
Yeah.
because to me, leadership is a different deal.
Yeah.
I have to teach him to accept every body part in every direction. And the day that I never have to challenge that, like when I bring him out of the pen and he don't check that anymore, that's when I have leadership. That's because it's a whole nother level, and I didn't know
That's
what
good.
to call that level, so I saved that level for now. I got leadership.
Right.
You don't get leadership in a day. You don't get it in a week. It might be a year.
And that's something you got to earn.
You got to earn that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't
that's really
use
good.
the term loosely either, right?
Absolutely.
But it's there's a lot of irons and a lot of boxes got to be checked for that one, for me anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting close to the end of our time, so we'll come full circle. But this is a question a little off book, but we've talked about these themes of earning the horses and consistency and trust. And then we haven't talked about trust, but I know training through trust is obviously a big piece of what you do. So I'm curious if you can speak to why the name. What does that mean to you?
To be honest with you, it was one of the marketers that I had way back in the day, and she'd I had a couple of them.
Yep.
So we figured it was time to just stick with one because we changed the name. It was Equine Connections, and then it was something else. And it was Doug Mills Horsemanship, and so I wanted a tag that I could, if I wanted to sell it, because I knew I was building a brand that could be sold. It didn't have to have my name attached to it or anything.
That's
so
smart.
That's kind of what we was going for, and trust to me is I talked about that before. Trust is not the first thing that I work on with a horse.
Right.
That trust comes from I'm going to revisit that pecking order every day, and he trusts my consistency from me counting.
Right.
That's where trust comes.
It's almost like it's a byproduct. It's like you're on the right track when your horse is trusting you.
Yeah. And when you walk out to catch him, he's happy to meet you at the gate.
That's big.
Right? They're not worried about what you're doing because they're comfortable with what you're doing.
How you know you're on the right track.
You're on the right track. Anytime that happens, when a horse follows you, as long as you can turn around and say, "Hey, that's close enough," and he respects that, you're on the right track. But if he's following you and smothering you at the same time, you're half on the right track. You got to keep that balance.
Right. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. I think different people have different tendencies of being better or worse at that. I could imagine that being able to hold that space, hold that boundary. I wish we had more time, because when you mentioned 7 things you do with people, I'm like, oh, I bet you there are certain ways that you work people through that to help them get more consistent with that timing and that spacing.
It's all the body control.
Yeah.
Come by my booth. I'll show you. I got a video playing nonstop of all my online students that are doing amazing things. And it's all about follow, feel.
Yeah.
I got a girl who can send a horse in a trailer from here to that camera down there
So
at a
good.
trot, and then call him back to her to trot.
Right.
And I never taught her how to do that. I've never done that before in my life.
Very cool.
Right? And this was on a horse that she couldn't ride for 5 years till she found me like 6 months ago. No more than that. 9 months ago, I guess now.
Yeah.
So it's just that kind of stuff comes fast if you're taking bite-sized pieces.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a good follow-up. If folks want to connect more with you throughout the rest of the weekend, where can they find you?
Oh, what is our booth? Oh, they'll find us. We're
They're in
We got a
the
big
program,
family, so
but
we're
you're going to be
everywhere.
doing a
We're in
few
the program.
demos, and do you offer some online stuff as well, or
And we got a demo coming up. I got 3-4 horses, I guess. We're going to be working at 3:30, I guess.
Awesome, fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doug.
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate your time
Yes.
and sharing your wisdom.
You're welcome.